A happy place comes in many colors. Whatever your color, bring happiness home with CertaPro painters. Get started today at CertaPro.com. Each CertaPro painter's business is independently owned and operated. Contractor license and registration information is available at CertaPro.com.
Do you love movies? So do I. What's up, y'all? It's KB, and I love movies. Inviting you to listen to The Conversation, a film podcast where passion meets perspective and opinion. From the old school to the new, I invite a guest on to discuss the movies that thrill us, challenge us, break our hearts, or even blow our minds. There's always new episodes dropping wherever you get your podcasts. So join the conversation. We don't just watch movies. We love talking about them too. The Conversation with KB Loves Movies, a part of Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Well, hello, heavies. This is Mark, and this is the first Wake Up Heavy Patreon-only episode. And today I will be talking about Robert Altman's Images. Now, this is a movie that I discovered last year and watched for the first time last year and watched for the second time yesterday. I have a feeling if I had seen it in my teens, mid-teens, late teens, early 20s, I would have really, really liked it. The reason that it's not a why didn't I rent this is because it wasn't available. When it first came out, it was kind of dismissed by critics and received a very limited theatrical run. And then it was believed that the negative had been destroyed in a fire that took place on the Columbia Pictures studio lot or warehouse or wherever they housed their negatives. And it was discovered in 2003. And if I'm not mistaken, it came out on DVD at that time. I don't know if it came out in the States. And then just recently, a new Blu-ray was released with some great commentary tracks and all that good stuff. I have not seen that yet. I'll admit right now, I'm not a big physical media purchaser, if that's the right word. I don't necessarily buy everything that I like, and there's a number of reasons for that. Growing up in the VHS days, you buy a VHS copy of something, and then DVD comes along, and you buy the DVD of that, and then Blu-ray comes along, and you buy a Blu-ray of that. And with streaming now and having things available at the touch of a few buttons, it's a conversation that I see a lot on film Twitter and other film sites and other things, that's how you support these films. And I get that, but man, it can sure make a dent in your pocketbook. So there's a few movies that I absolutely know that I have to have and not rely on streaming, and I have those. And most other movies, I'm fine with, waiting for them to stream, or if they disappear. If this goes off of Amazon Prime, I'm not going to be heartbroken. I'll wait till it comes back, either to them or another service. But it can get pricey and expensive, and a lot of these Blu-rays that have a lot of special features can get really pricey. So anyway, that's my little 2 cents on that. This is one of those, it was kind of strange as to how it even entered my brain. It kept coming up as a recommendation on Amazon Prime, and I'm like, why is a Robert Altman movie coming up for me as a recommendation? I went through a period of time where I enjoyed his movies. He wasn't one of the big 70s guys that I latched onto, like Scorsese or Lynch even, or Kubrick or Coppola or somebody like that kind of sprang up in that New American Cinema group. It was, someone that I knew about, and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, MASH, Three Women. He had a long stretch there of critical darling movies, and they may not have done all that well at the box office, but he was one of those 70s auteurs. I didn't really get into him until the 90s when Shortcuts and The Player came out, and then went back and kind of explored further. But this is a movie that I never heard about in reference to him because of the reasons I mentioned. And so finally I clicked on the image on Amazon and was surprised to see that it was listed as a horror movie. And then I read the description and I was like, oh shit, this is like right up my alley. And watched it and immediately liked it. I mean, from the opening credits, it was so much in my wheelhouse, and was just amazed that this wasn't a bigger movie. So we've got a really small cast here. There's basically 5 main players and a couple of additional supporting characters, but we've got Susannah York, Renee Auberjonois, and I really practiced. Of course, I didn't say it very well, but I've never known how to pronounce that guy's name. Marcel Bozzuffi, which I'm probably just destroying, Hugh Millay, Cathryn Harrison, and then the supporting characters are John Morley and Barbara Baxley, who is actually only heard from in the movie over the phone. And a couple of these guys, Renee Auberjonois, and I think the male actors were kind of in Altman's little acting troupe. Don't think Susannah York had worked with him before, and I don't know that she worked with him afterward. And the interesting thing here is that all the characters' names are transpositions of the actors. So Susannah York is Cathryn, and Cathryn Harrison plays Susannah. Renee Auberjonois plays Hugh. Marcel Bozzuffi plays Renee. And Hugh Millay plays Marcel. So right from the beginning here, we've got this idea of switching identities. And that is basically the main focus of the movie. And the cinematographer was Vilmos Zsigmond, who worked with all those 70s auteurs, Scorsese, De Palma, Spielberg, and has a long list of credits. The score is by John Williams, and it is that John Williams, and it's coupled with what's called sounds, and those are by, let me see how I can do on this name, Stomu Yamashita. Yeah, I'm sure I just butchered that. And the sounds are, there's a lot of percussive sounds in the movie. There's chimes and then other percussion instruments, and that it's sort of hard to delineate between the two, the score by John Williams and then the sounds, because John Williams' score is also very plucky and dissonant, but combined, it's a real interesting kind of tension building score and makes you on edge the whole time. And that is evident from the beginning, the opening credits. We have Susannah York reading from a children's book that the character is writing, and it is actually a book that she wrote. So she is reading her own words there, and this was kind of an addition to the script. York told Altman that she had written this book, and he read it and said, okay, this will be in the movie now, and we will hear this in voiceover throughout, and it works wonderfully. But she's in her apartment in London, I'm assuming, reading this, and then there's these hard cuts to another location, and the movie kind of comes crashing in.
That doesn't sound right.
I meant to say the score and credits come crashing in. The movie's already playing. We get this split that we will see throughout with the characters and the score and just about every other detail of the movie. And so it throws you off a little bit, and I love stuff like that. So again, I was sucked in right from the beginning. And she is married to Hugh, who's played by Mr. Forget it. Renee, the guy from Vincent. Let's leave him at that. And they are taking a holiday off to her childhood countryside home. And they travel there, and they make a stop so that Hugh can go hunt birds. While Susannah York, as Cathryn, is up on this hill, she looks down at her little countryside home, and she sees their car pull up. She looks behind her. Their car is still there. And then she sees herself get out of the car and start unpacking into the house. And right at that moment, I knew, oh man, this is so much a Mark movie. It's not even funny. Throw in a doppelganger, and I am fucking there for it. And it's interesting that we don't have her running down there to find out what's going on. We stick with that version of her. And this happens again and again in the movie. She's constantly seeing herself. We don't know which version of her we're then left with. And that is awesome. It can lead to some... Let's try that again. It can lead to some confusion, but it's not the kind of confusion that like pulls me out of the story. I just let it go. Don't try and figure out which version this is, what's real, what's in her mind. She's obviously suffering from some kind of mental illness. And this isn't a case of where we get the backstory of her having been institutionalized before, but it does kind of coincide with that whole hysterical woman subgenre that I have said numerous times that I love. You know, she's not being gaslighted necessarily throughout the movie. Hugh, her husband, is dismissive and cold, but he doesn't ever, say she's imagining things or this isn't what you're seeing or anything like that. It doesn't even really ever come up because she doesn't express what's going on very much. She has a couple of freak out scenes, but she's not like, I'm seeing these guys from my past and asking if he's, it's not that kind of scenario. It's very interesting. The movie gets compared to Repulsion a lot, and I kind of had that in my head the first time I watched it, but the characters are very different. In Repulsion, Catherine Deneuve is virtually catatonic throughout, has very few lines, is very withdrawn. In this movie, the character of Cathryn is not that way, and she almost seems to be fully aware of what is happening, but still struggling with figuring out what is reality and what isn't. Besides seeing herself, she's haunted by a dog that is either real or imagined, but that she is, for some reason, afraid of, and it's never really explained. So this could be childhood trauma or something, since they are at her childhood countryside home. But she has shows great disdain towards this dog whenever it shows up, and I found that kind of unusual. And then there are men from her past that come in and out of scenes in a variety of manners, and one is an ex-lover who had apparently died 3 years before. We question and she questions in the movie, did he really die? Did he get on that plane and die? And then the other man is someone that lives in the area that she has known for a long time and has a history with. And he is the one that has the daughter that is named Susannah. And she is similar looking to Cathryn. And so we've got this doubling with her. And of course, she spends a good bit of the movie at this countryside home. So once again, we don't know if this is all in her head, if these are real people, if they're really there. The husband does interact with them, so you kind of have to take that as a cue. But there's no real set clue as to when things have gone off the rails, when it's imaginary, when it's real. The characters switch places in different ways. The male characters, sometimes her husband Hugh will be walking through the room, and then Renee appears on the other side. Or sometimes they switch in a scene, or sometimes they're all present at one time. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what is going on in her head. And of course, her husband Hugh never interacts with the dead lover, but he does interact with Marcel, who lives nearby and has the daughter. So again, there are probably cues that I'm missing out on. I know that chimes play a part of this. There's a little set of chimes in their car, and then there's chimes outside the house, and then there are mirrors, of course, everywhere, and she's shown in mirrors. Actually, all the characters are shown in mirrors at different times. And so we get that idea of split images and split personalities. And the images themselves relate to not only the mirrors, but the fact that Hugh is a photographer, and he has one of those old cameras. Of course, this was made in 1972, so it was probably a new camera then, but when you look through it, the image is upside down. And so we've got a lot of that going on, looking through windows. And then we've got these phone calls. She constantly gets phone calls from some gal that is implying that her husband is cheating on her. And I, for some reason, had it in my head after my initial watch of this that it ended up being her on the phone. But I'm not sure if I got that right. So when I watched it yesterday, I didn't pick up on that again. And I also had it in my head that there was a theme running through where her taste is off, and she's shown early on taking a bite of an apple and kind of looking at it quizzically, like this doesn't taste right. And for some reason, I thought that was a theme throughout. Maybe it's from another movie, but that can be a sign of mental illness or a sign of brain tumors. So I may have just inserted that idea on my own. And with the phone calls, we also have a number of occasions where she hears someone whispering her name. And I put the subtitles on for one of the parts, and it just said whispering. So it was no help at all. I was like, what are they saying? But again, I may be wrong, but I think it's her own voice. Another motif is the puzzle that they are putting together in the country house. And it becomes apparent as the movie goes along that it is a picture of the house itself.
I'm not going to be able to finish this puzzle. There's too many pieces missing.
And then there's a nice little bit at the end, which I won't spoil, that relates back to the book that the character has been working on and reading in voiceover throughout the movie. Now, I don't want to I'm not going to get spoilery in these little things. Kind of like the why didn't I rent this? This isn't a deep dive, so I would hope that people, since it's pretty widely available to anyone who has Amazon Prime, at least in the States, to search it out. It's part of your membership, so watch it. But the end is satisfying. Maybe not to everyone, but again, it's something that hits me right in my wheelhouse. It's kind of the perfect type of ending. And I was actually even surprised by the ending on my second watch because I had kind of forgotten. And I got, you get sort of loopy during all this with the doppelgangers and what's real and what's not. At one point, Cathryn finally decides that she's going to take steps to figure out who is and isn't real, with tragic consequences at the end. The last scene of the movie is kind of one of those perfect little twists that I love. Couple of final thoughts here. This was Altman's only horror movie. It's maybe a little bit of a stretch to call it a horror movie, although I think it definitely fits into the psychological horror genre, that hysterical woman subgenre that I've discussed. And it does have some similarities to his film Three Women, with the idea of switching identities, although this isn't between other women. But the inspiration is still kind of akin to Ingmar Bergman's Persona, with images and then with three women. So I think that's about it for this first Patreon-only episode. I think I did this backwards, which is sort of my MO on a lot of this stuff. I know that there's a lot of these things that I do wrong. I kind of read, what to do when you want to start a podcast and dismissed half of them and do the other ones backwards. And, I started the Patreon page and announced it really only on Instagram, but no one has signed up yet. So I could be talking to no one here, and that's fine. But if you want longer episodes, feel free to comment here or on any other social media that I belong to. And I'll do that if that seems more worth your dollar bill. Otherwise, they'll probably be around the same length as Why Didn't I Rent This episodes, which is hopefully under a half an hour. And again, when I do something like, and I'm really, really pondering this, and I'll probably explain why in the next Why Didn't I Rent This episode, but I'm really thinking about doing that Scala Cinema episode for here. And I've been doing a little bit of research, and I discovered something kind of interesting yesterday when I stumbled on a site online that had some information about the Scala's heyday, which apparently, while I was there, they were right smack in the middle of. So anyway, more on that in the next Why Didn't I Rent This? I'll talk about what I found about the Scala, and it relates back to the Eraserhead episode a little bit. For now, that should do it for this. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to wake up heavy.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
From Weirding Way Media, Cambridge and Wishawn is a podcast about two guys' obsessions, passions, and hobbies. Those two guys are
Ronald Zarigian, host of the Skelevator YouTube channel,
and Mark Begley, host of Wake Up Heavy Recollections of Horror.
Each month we talk about the toys, comics, movies, books, TV shows, and other cultural phenomena that captured our imaginations and helped shape who we are today.
From Masters of the Universe to Saturday Night Live, Star Wars to Harry Houdini, The Muppets to The Elephant Man, Ronnie and Mark dive deep into the recesses of their minds to pull out treasured memories of things lost but never forgotten.
Join us on the first Tuesday of each month over at weirdingwaymedia.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Little girl, where are you hiding? If you don't come out, I'll get Amara.
Welcome, Patreon subscribers, or should I say subscriber, since I only have one. Maybe I should make this personal and say, hi, Ronnie. Thank you for being a Patreon donor. This is the second episode, the first for February, and most likely the last, since it is the 27th today. And this is one of the reasons, a good example of why I didn't want to do early content. It is the end of the month. People paying a monthly fee may have possibly been paying for nothing. I'm down to the wire here. So again, I knew this is how it would be for me. So important to note, that is why I set the subscriptions up the way I did, or subscription, I should say. Anyway, this is Patreon episode number 2 on my list of films from the
That doesn't sound right.
I knew I was going to mess that up. The Psychotronic Encyclopedia of Film from Michael J. Weldon. And if you are unfamiliar with Psychotronic, I suggest going deep into Google and finding out about it. It was a fanzine at first, and I think the impetus was to write about films that were actually playing on TV. If I'm not mistaken, he is a New Yorker, and they had some great local channels that would show these weird horror, atomic age sci-fi, foreign films, Godzilla films and things like that on their kind of creature feature. And so he would write about those movies that weren't really being played anywhere else. And then it expanded, I think, when he probably got old enough to go to 42nd Street and see exploitation movies, even X-rated films and all that, and put out this zine that became kind of big. I discovered it in the mid to late 80s at Tower Records and was really struck by the glowing neon covers of most of them. And they would have contrasting colors, so not complementary, but like magenta and blue, or stuff that really struck your eye. Of course, the font itself is a classic now. So I started picking up the magazine. At some point, I got a subscription to it, and I don't really know the timing here when I bought the book, but it was around the same time they probably publicized it in the magazine. I found it or ordered it from a local bookstore and proceeded to go through and read pretty much every single entry. And this is a thick book, and there are God knows how many reviews in it, thousands. And I had a little notepad, and I would mark those movies that I wanted to see down in that notepad, and ended up with about 230. I counted it the other day, and I may have missed a couple, but around 230 films that I wrote down. Now, in the intervening 30 years, my tastes and likes and wants changed. I didn't see too many of them back then, and I'll kind of get into that when I start going through the list. More recently, I have seen quite a few when this resurgence of horror came to me. And it's very interesting for me to note just how similar my tastes as a, 15, 16, all the way up to 20-year-old is to my taste now. And I will be turning 50 next month. So a lot of these movies were on my list then. They came back up when I started looking at horror movie blogs like Horror Movie A Day and The Bloody Pit of Horror, and would encounter the same titles, and they would pique that same interest. And so a lot of those that I found through those sites, I would track down and see, and a lot I still haven't seen. And then I kind of pulled this book back out a little while ago, even I think before I started the podcast, and looked at that list and thought, my God, it's the same kind of stuff. It's all these Italian horror movies, hysterical women, just those weird oddball films that were kind of prominent in the 70s, like something like The Visitor, which actually isn't on my list. I'm kind of surprised. I should go and read the review. It probably wasn't very positive, but those really weird movies that seem to be made in that decade. And I have those magazine issues somewhere up in our rafters, and I need to pull them down and put them in a safe place. But the book has been on my bookshelf for decades. Along with that book, of course, were the Danny Peary cult movie books. I have 1 and 3. I think 2, it was stacked a little less in favor of movies that I like, so I never picked that one up, and I should have. And then my other big book was the Encyclopedia of Horror Movies that I got at this great bookstore. I don't think I have any listeners in the Carmel or Monterey Bay area, but a lot of people from this area travel there, and they had this great used, I think it was a new and used bookstore on Ocean Avenue, the kind of main drag that goes down to the beach. And I would pick up all kinds of things there. That's where I got the Midnight Movies book that I discussed on the Eraserhead episode. I got my Encyclopedia of Horror Movies book there. And when I discovered Bukowski, we would take trips usually during the summer and either stay at somebody's place that we knew or rent a cabin there. If you can hear that ding, that's my fucking phone. I don't know if that goes through or not. It goes through my headphones, but since I'm talking on the microphone, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to ignore it because I'm in mid-thought. There was a great bookstore up more towards the end of town, and I would get my Bukowski there, when and if I could find them. But I really that was like the highlight of my trip. Psychotronic, I didn't get there, but those books, the Research, Incredibly Strange Film book was another kind of pivotal course study for me. John McCarty's Modern Horror. If you follow me on Twitter, I have a picture of a stack of them. And then there was another book from Michael J. Weldon. And I have it. Shoot. Anyway, but I have a stack of movie books from my late teens and early 20s that I just dove into. That was my movie school. I took some courses in college that were technically English classes, but they were film, and those were my upper division electives, and maybe I'll get into that someday because I did take a horror movie class, and we watched some good movies. I barely remember that class, but yeah, there's some good flicks on that list. Okay, so what I decided to do, instead of just rattling off this list of the movies that I've seen, which is basically what I am going to do, but I kind of chunked them into groups of 5, and I'll go through and probably pick out one to kind of spotlight from that list. I'm not going to be able to offer too much advice as far as finding these, but if a title sounds interesting, use the justwatch.com site or the Just Watch app. Very, very good for finding movies. It doesn't have everything, like I mentioned. I found See No Evil using my Fire Stick, and that's always an option too. But instead of hopping from service to service, which is what I used to do on a nearly daily basis, the Just Watch thing is kind of a catch-all. And I link movies on the show notes for that. Sometimes if it's not actually streaming on one of the sites that I belong to. So I won't be offering up too much. If I do know where it's streaming, I will let you know on those kind of touchstone films. There's 42 movies on my list that I'm going to read off here or discuss out of, like I said, over 200. And as I was looking at it, I thought, well, I could look at the description of every one of these because I'm sure there are some that I've seen under different titles. And this is very common. I've mentioned this before a lot, especially with exploitation films and horror movies. They just got renamed by distributors on a whim, to kind of sell to their markets. So I'm sure there's probably a few more in there. There may be some that I just don't remember seeing. back then. But this is as close to accurate as I could get and hope for at the moment. So let's get into the films. And I am doing this in alphabetical order because that is how my list was written out. Alrighty, let's go. First off, we have Alien Contamination, which is one of the numerous Italian Alien ripoffs, and this one is pretty fun. It's got a lot of exploding heads and weird dialogue. Asylum is a great anthology film, one of my favorites, and it's not Hammer. I think it's Amicus, which was sort of their competitor back in the 60s and 70s. Next up is one of the weirdest movies that I have seen in recent years called The Baby. And it was on TCM, I think, a couple times. And it's about a grown man who acts like a baby. And there is actually, I think the baby voice is overdubbed for him. And it's really creepy and weird and surprisingly rated PG. Track it down if you can. It is a mind blower. And then I have The Beast Within, which I don't really need to talk about because I did an episode of Why Didn't I Rent This on it. And then we have our first Argento entry, and there are a lot. So this kind of makes me think I had this book pretty early, or not early, but not so late 80s, because a lot of these movies I saw by the time I was in college. And the first on the list is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I'm sure I rented this at least one or two times back then. And just watched it the other day, actually. It is available on Tubi, which that's Tubi, and that is one of those free streaming apps. And we actually have it through our Xfinity plan. They've got Netflix, Prime, Tubi, and a couple others that you can access through Xfinity, and it's also on our Fire Stick. Next group, I have The Blind Dead, and I'm kind of surprised by this. This is, I was not surprised by the movie, but surprised that it was on my list back then and on my list now. And it was, I think, not a trilogy, but a quadrilogy of movies about the Knights Templar, and read about them on a number of different sites, and a lot of people really like them, and I have not been that impressed. I've tried to watch a couple of them. I think I'm watching edited versions, which is probably why. So all the nudity and sex and violence is cut out, which is never enjoyable for me. Blue Sunshine. This is an awesome 70s trippy acid flashback cult weirdo movie starring Zalman King, who it went on to do a lot of those, was it Red Shoe Diaries? Something like that. One of those kind of softcore shows for Showtime or Cinemax. This is currently on Shudder, and looking at it right now, I'm thinking I need to watch this one again. It is a fun one. This is our second Argento entry, The Cat o' Nine Tails, which I have seen a couple of times over the years. And then Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, which was brought up on the Deranged episode of Why Didn't I Rent This by Bob Clark and Alan Ormsby, mostly Alan Ormsby. And then I had this old anthology movie called Dead of Night on here, and I have seen this on TCM, I don't know how many times. And it's kind of fun. There's a couple of kind of comedic stories in it, but I should go back and read the entry on that because I'm curious as to what piqued my interest in the review. Next batch, we have another Clark and Ormsby joint with Death Dream, and this was a movie that I really, really, really wanted to see. The description, every time I read about it, in Psychotronic, the Encyclopedia of Horror Movies, it seemed so much my thing. And then when I finally got to watch it again on TCM, I was a little bit disappointed. And it's a slow burn. There isn't a lot going on, but It was on Shudder for a while, and I tried it again and liked it more. I think I need to give it a third shot. Next is Deep Red by Dario Argento, and I know that I watched this back in the late 80s or early 90s. Probably saw the edited version. And just a little tangent here. A lot of the editing on the Argento movies, and this used to drive me crazy, because once I kind of got hooked on films, I wanted to see them in the correct aspect ratio. I wanted to see them as the director intended. So hearing about, American versions and watching things on video really drove me nuts. And I would see this movie as the Hatchet murders on the video shelves. And I know that was a truncated version, but I think on things like this and Phenomena and one or two others, what they ended up cutting out actually was a lot of the dialogue. They would kind of drop some of the humorous dialogue or some of the extra exposition. And so a lot of those films actually move a lot more quickly in the American versions. Okay, next I have Demonoid, which is pretty fun, kind of crazy. I think it's a
That doesn't sound right.
demonically possessed hand in the movie. Yeah, check that one out. It's playing somewhere. And then Don't Answer the Phone. And this is, I'm not going to give this a recommendation because it's a pretty ugly, sleazy exploitation film with lots of kind of overt racism. And I think there's a character named Fresno Joe or something. I know there's a reference to Fresno in it. But yeah, that was not fun. And then Don't Go in the House. This one actually is pretty fun. I watched an edited version, unfortunately. I think it's playing on Prime, but that is probably the edited version that I watched. But it's really, really strange and off-kilter. It's kind of a sleazy psycho, or I think in my notes I had actually put down that it was strange, like Tourist Trap. So I need to watch that one again to kind of remember exactly. But this guy's, I think the reference to Psycho is in the fact that he had an overbearing mom, and he stalks women and brings them back to his house and basically sets them on fire. Next group, I have The Evil Eye, a really fun Mario Bava hysterical women movie from the 60s with John Saxon. Eyes of a Stranger, which is something that I just finally saw within the last couple of months, with Lauren Taze from The Love Boat and Jennifer Jason Leigh's, I think, first role. Next Argento film is Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which I have not seen in a very long time, but I know that I eventually did see it, probably back when I was working at a video store. And then Frankenstein Created Woman, and this one has come up before. This is the movie that I saw on the Action Theater or Creature Feature on Saturday afternoon that involved decapitation and then a disembodied head that kept popping up. And so I had two movies on my list that were possibilities for that. That's all I could remember about the movie. And this is that movie. And again, thanks to TCM, probably during October, one of the last couple of years, I finally saw it again after, God, I was probably like 12 years old when I first saw it. And then we have Frightmare, and I didn't bother to look to see which one it was. I think I have seen 3 different movies with that, either as the title, as an alternate title, and none of them were all that good, so pick a different title, I guess. Next bunch, we've got Galaxy of Terror, and this is a super fun, really gross alien ripoff again, produced by Roger Corman, if I'm not mistaken, and starring Sid Haig and Aaron Moran from Happy Days. And Sid Haig is a local boy. Don't think he lived here long, but he was born in Fresno. Fresno has a large Armenian community, and Sid Haig is Armenian. I have seen him numerous times over the years And I think some of the times I didn't even realize it was him until much, much later. I saw him at Tower Records a couple of times, and then I actually, on 2 different occasions, stood behind him in line at the post office near where I used to live. And it was out of context. This kind of stuff is out of context, and he's not super, super famous. He's in one of my all-time favorite movies, Spider Baby. But yeah, it was always kind of weird seeing him, and I usually left him alone. He was in the post office. He was often with an older woman. I don't know, may have been his mom, but I don't know. He's pretty old now too. So, but yeah, good old Sid Haig, Fresno boy. Go to No Such Thing as a Bad Movies podcast. They did an episode on this actually, and it's pretty fun. It's actually the reason I watched the movie, so shout out to them. And the next is Haunts, and I have mentioned this in passing a number of times. It is one of those hysterical women films that I watched, kind of a string of them all in a row sometime within the last year or two, along with Pigs and The Witch Who Came from the Sea and a bunch of others. So again, I probably read about that more recently on the Horror Movie A Day blog and piqued my interest now and piqued my interest back then. And then I actually have a William Castle film on here, and I'm not the biggest fan of his stuff. There's a couple of movies, the not so gimmicky ones. He was kind of known as the one that employed like having little electric shocks on theater seats or having a ghost fly down on a string during his movies. He was the big showman. And but this one, Homicidal, is a fairly interesting gender swapping movie that, again, thanks to TCM, I've seen a couple of times. Next up is Kill Baby Kill, my second Mario Bava flick on here, and I'm surprised I don't have more because in recent years, those are the ones that I put on my list from the blogs and other websites that I read. This one has got a lot of, it's real, the camera movements are, I mean, it's a really expressive film and super creepy. There's a lot of creepy shots of this little girl who is either a ghost or just kind of terrorizing these people, but it's super creepy. And I don't know if it's still on Shudder or not, but try and track that one down. And then The Last Man on Earth, and this is a little bit interesting story. This was a Vincent Price movie from the early 60s, if I'm not mistaken, based on Richard Matheson's story that has been made into like 4 or 5 different movies. The Omega Man with Charlton Heston in the 70s.
That doesn't sound right.
70s is basically the same story. And then the Will Smith movie, I Am Legend. These are all based on that one book of Richard Matheson's, and now I can't remember what the original title is. I think it's I Am Legend. Yeah, kind of if you watch that, you'll sort of get a Night of the Living Dead feel from it. They're supposed to be vampires, but they act more like zombies. And from what I understand, it was an influence on Romero with Night of the Living Dead. Next group starts with La Mora, and I am using the truncated title for this. It has numerous titles, and they're all kind of long. This is one of those oddball gems that I just absolutely fell in love with when I finally watched it. And again, this was a recent find for me because I didn't remember putting it in my Psychotronic list, but I don't recall where I read about it. I just know that it was on my IMDb watch list for a long time. Something brought it up, and I tracked it down and I watched it on YouTube because there isn't a good release of it. And it's just a weird, kind of fairy tale-like, sort of surreal vampire story about a young girl searching for her dad. And if of any of the movies that I talk about, this is probably one of the highest on the list of recommendations. Try and track it down. I have Manos, The Hands of Fate on my list, and I probably saw it very shortly after putting it on there on MST3K, Mystery Science Theater 3000. I haven't watched the movie itself without their commentary. I really don't have any desire to, but it was on my list, so here it is. Next, I have Mary, Mary, Bloody Mary, which ended up kind of being a disappointment. It is by the same director that made Alucarda, which is a much superior film and one that I would highly recommend. It's kind of a exploitation, satanic cult, witch coven. So there's quite a bit of nudity, and it gets kind of heavy into the witchcraft stuff. So if that's not your thing, don't track it down. But I really enjoyed it. I have Miss 45 on here, the exploitation classic rape revenge story from Abel Ferreira. And that was, it was okay. His movies are hit and miss with me, mostly miss. Excuse me. And then I have Mother's Day, which is a silly backwoods slasher that's kind of fun. And it was remade recently with, what's her name? I have not seen the remake, and I don't plan to anytime soon. Next is Nightmare, and I have this listed on my notes that I keep when I watch movies as Nightmares in a Damaged Brain, and it is from 1981, and it is one of those batshit crazy treasures. I think it's streaming on Shudder, or it had been. It's on Shudder or Prime. It's interesting. Very, very interesting. Private Parts is next. And no, not the Howard Stern movie. This is a Paul Bartel movie, which I enjoy much more than Eating Raoul. Eating Raoul is a little too campy, on-the-nose commentary for me. And Private Parts is a little bit weirder and grittier. And I'm pretty sure I caught that on TCM. They play it regularly. I've seen it a number of times in their listings. And I actually have a slasher on my list, The Prowler. And I have watched this 2 or 3 times over the last couple years. And it is an average slasher film. It's not very interesting other than some really great special effects from Tom Savini. And my other Knights Templar movie that I have on here is Return of the Blind Dead. That's one of the
That doesn't sound right.
Quadrilogy along with The Blind Dead. Again, I don't remember which ones I've watched or tried to watch. And next, we have Road Games. And this is one that I have to recommend. Again, on my list back then, kind of came back up through a blog or something. Took me a long time to get to see it. It popped up on Shudder sometime last year and wasn't there for long. I only got to watch it once. But this is a great Ozploitation film by Richard Franklin, who directed Psycho 2. Patrick, which is a really fucking weird Australian movie. This stars Jamie Lee Curtis and Stacy Keach. He is a truck driver hauling, I think, sides of beef or something across the, what do they call their desert in Australia? It's called the Outback, Mark. But anyway, he runs across a killer on the road, and it's a really great cat and mouse movie. And Stacy Keach is not one of my favorite actors, but he's really weird in this one. A lot of time talking to himself in the cab of his truck, so it's pretty fun. Hopefully that'll pop back up somewhere soon, because I would like to watch it again. I had on my list Screams of Fear, which I watched recently and didn't realize I had already seen it, or had already seen at least the last 30 minutes. And I was watching it and going, wait a minute, this looks familiar. It's a 1960s women in peril movie with Susan Strasberg. It's fair to okay. The Seventh Victim. This is a Val Lewton produced movie about a satanic cult in Greenwich Village. Surprising, I don't know if this is the first instance of a satanic cult in a movie, but pretty, this isn't normal stuff for back then. It was all zombies and monsters and things. Pretty fun, atmospheric little thriller. I had Something Evil on my list. This is an early Steven Spielberg flick, and I watched it. I went through, I've gone through my hysterical women phase, and I'll go through TV movie phases pretty regularly, and those are very hard to track down. I'm probably watched this on YouTube. It has a great 70s cast, and it's nice and spooky haunted house movie. Strange Behavior and or Dead Kids is another weird Australian flick, and I think it has kind of a companion in another weird movie called Strange Invaders. And I have seen both, and they are both okay. I think Strange Invaders is the one that I liked more and would probably watch again. Sweet Kill is on my list, and I watched this on TCM sometime over the last year. Oh, no, I didn't. I watched it on one of those cheapo free streaming apps through my Fire Stick. This is a fair to middling, bland exploitation movie with Tab Hunter late in his career. And then we're down to the end here, the last two movies, The Toolbox Murders. And this is one, I could probably do a Why Didn't I Rent This? Because I remember seeing this video box at the rental store all the time and just being kind of, I think, spooked off by, again, a little too exploitation-y for me. That wasn't my thing back then. Still not really my thing, but when you get back into this stuff, you just start watching everything. It was available somewhere, and it has Cameron Mitchell, who, if you're, a fan of bad movies, you know all about Cameron Mitchell. But it has a really interesting late 70s, early 80s cast of familiar faces, and it is kind of fun. It's weird. It's a weird one. I think it takes sort of a left turn about halfway through the movie. Yeah, it's probably available somewhere. I have watched the remake, and it is okay. As far as exploitation movies go, it's one that I would actually recommend. And then last on my list is Twitch of the Death Nerve, which is one of the dozen alternative titles for Bay of Blood, which is a seminal classic proto-slasher film that you need to see. It's crazy. It's a crazy proto-slasher with multiple killers, a very convoluted story, as the Italians are wont to do. And you will recognize, if you are a fan of slasher movies in general and Friday the 13th specifically, you will recognize numerous kills in this film that were later used in those movies. So, okay, that is the end of my list. That didn't take as long as I thought it would. Thank you very much for listening to this, for patronizing Wake Up Heavy with your dollars. I appreciate it greatly. Spread the word, maybe. Let your friends know. Again, I know I'm talking to one person here, so this is sort of irrelevant, but I need to get my family and friends to patronize at least for a short while so that other people will jump on. Otherwise, this is going to lead nowhere, and I'm going to be talking to one person who shouldn't be paying for these anyway, so... Up next, if you have suggestions for March Patreon episodes, please let me know. I do actually have a couple ideas that relate back to the Women in Horror Month series that I did on Wake Up Heavy. Talk about some of those modern horror movies that are female-centric, like The Black Coat's Daughter and The Witch, and a couple of those other really good, atmospheric, creepy little movies. Okay, I think that is it for today. So let's end like we normally do and say thank you for listening, and don't forget to wake up heavy.